Here's a story you're probably not going to see on other cable news networks. When police officers are investigated in high-profile shootings, and the prosecutors, even in more liberal Chicago, agree that criminal charges should not be brought against the police officers. As I've said before, that doesn't fit the narrative. Prosecutors in Chicago announced yesterday that they will not charge two police officers who shot and killed a 13-year-old Adam Toledo and 22-year-old Anthony Alvarez in separate incidents just 2 days apart last March. The news came less than a week after a grand jury in Ohio declined to bring charges against a police officer who shot and killed a knife-wielding 16-year-old girl last year. Both Toledo and Alvarez were armed and running from officers during the deadly encounters. Now, this is the incident with Adam Toledo.
Please stop! Stop right now! Hey, show me your hand! Stop it! Stop it! Shots fired! Shots fired! Get an ambulance up here now!
Stillman and another officer were responding to an alert from gunshot detection system ShotSpotter that showed that 8 gunshots were fired in the area. As the officers arrived at the area where the shots were fired, they found Toledo and another man walking side by side. Both the man and 13-year-old Toledo ran. As Stillman chased Toledo down, he observed that Toledo had a gun in his hand and ordered him to drop it. In body cam footage of the incident, it appears Toledo dropped the gun behind a fence before slightly turning towards the officer with his hands raised, just as Stillman fired his weapon, striking Toledo once in the chest. Toledo died at the scene. It was a tragedy, but not a crime. The officer had to make that split-second decision. Just 2 days later, Anthony Alvarez was shot and killed by Officer Evan Solano.
Hey! Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
Body camera footage shows Alvarez walking near a gas station and carrying a gun as police approached him. Alvarez dropped a bag he was carrying and took off. The two officers then gave chase on foot. Solano eventually caught up to Alvarez and shouted at him to drop the gun before firing 5 shots, striking Alvarez in the back and left knee. Alvarez was wanted on outstanding warrants when he was approached by police. Now, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office said a lack of evidence underscored their decision not to press charges against the officers, feeling that jurors could reasonably conclude that the CPD officers were in reasonable fear of dying or getting seriously injured when they respectively fired on Toledo and Alvarez. State's Attorney Kim Fox said that while Solano violated department policy when it comes to foot chases, neither he nor Stillman broke the law.
Under Illinois law, an officer is justified in using force likely to cause death or great bodily harm when he reasonably believes that such force is necessary to prevent death or great bodily harm to himself or to other such persons.
So there won't be criminal charges, but Toledo's family has filed a civil suit against Officer Stillman. Look, their grief is understandable, but it's also incredibly easy to second-guess what an officer might have done, having 20/20 hindsight. And that doesn't really change the question of whether Officer Stillman should potentially be put in prison for his actions. Joining me now is Terry Austin, an attorney and host for Law and Crime, and Sean Stix Larkin, retired Tulsa police lieutenant. First, Stix, let me ask you about the media side of this for a moment. I guess we shouldn't be surprised that almost no one on the national level is now covering this part of the story, even though the other part of the story was covered ad nauseum by so many.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, it'll get covered if there's a lot of protests out there or if there's any, rioting that comes as a result of this. But this is typical what we see in a lot of the officer-involved shootings. Emotions are very, very high. The facts of the case are not out. And from the get-go, people are very, very upset, and the media is jumping on this. It's great for ratings. It's great for conversation for, these guys on these shows. But once the facts of a case come out, the investigation is done, more often than not, this is exactly what we see, is the officer is justified in using the deadly force that was required there. And you hit it right on the head. Hey, it's a tragedy. A 13-year-old kid was killed. But the officer's actions were completely justified in what he did that night.
Terry, do you think that the officers in either of the cases should have been prosecuted?
Look, each of these cases is different, but I think that we could have seen a prosecution because we could leave it to a jury whether or not it was reasonable. Were they being reasonable when they thought they might die or when they thought there might be bodily injury, great harm to themselves? I think in the first case where we're talking about Adam Toledo, the 13-year-old, I think in that case it was a split-second decision. I can see how Officer Stillman might have thought he was turning and was going to shoot. On the other hand, he did drop that gun and he was raising his hands and he was responding to commands. Why not let a jury think about that? In the second case, go ahead.
Well, let me ask you, I want to ask you about that issue, because that's the argument that a lot of people always make, right? Which is, why not just bring it to a jury? And the response to that, of course, is that indicting someone for a crime by a prosecutor is a big deal, right? We always talk about what enormous power prosecutors have. And I think just sort of saying, well, you know, we might as well let a jury decide. I think the prosecutor ought to believe that he or she can go into a courtroom and prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And even in a department that is, you know, as I mentioned, a more liberal city, you have the prosecutors evaluating the case and saying, we don't think that we can be able to prove that. And I say to them, good for them in not saying, oh, well, you know, let's just throw up our hands and hand it off to a jury.
Well, obviously, the prosecution has that discretion, and they have to be very careful when they use that discretion. And if they don't think that they can prosecute the case and win, or there's enough evidence, then they can't bring it. And that's what they've stated in this case. The question is, what does the evidence say? And when you look at this, I think this is a very difficult one. I think this one is more difficult than the other one. This one is difficult because you did see
this one being which one?
Happened when Stillman, the Stillman case,
okay.
I think is very difficult because Toledo was responding to commands, but there was just that split second. So you have to understand that Stillman is thinking, is he turning? Yeah. Is he going to shoot me? I saw that gun. So I think that one was the more difficult case for the prosecution. And I understand, as tragic as it was, why the prosecution thinks they might not be able to win that case.
Yeah, and I think we can both talk about, as Styx did, how heartbreaking it is, right? I mean, I read a lot about Toledo, and, like, you know, it broke my heart that the kid is now dead. But
right.
He was 13. Cops don't know that he's 13. When they arrive on a scene, they see a guy with a gun. They don't get to look at his background. They don't get to do what I did and start feeling for him after the fact. They have to get to the scene and see a guy with a gun in his hand and turning towards them. Yes, tragedy. But the notion of charging someone like that, to me, I think they did the right thing. And B, I do wish that the media in general would cover more after a prosecutor, as they did in this case, evaluated it and said, we're not going to prosecute, because these police officers are getting vilified right and left. But Terry, let me give you a final.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, well, final word is CNN did report on it. Maybe they're not national, but as far as the other case, I just want to mention real quick, I do think Alvarez case, that one should have been prosecuted more so than the other case, because in the Alvarez case where Officer Solano shot, why did they even stop him in the first place? These people weren't committing crimes. They were walking down the street and they recognized him from the night before. So that's a big.
And he had an outstanding warrant. He had an outstanding warrant, though.
Right. But they didn't know that when,
Right. But no, that's true. But again, questioning after the fact, like, well, you know, why did this interaction start? That's not the legal question. The legal question is, you can argue about policing, right? And there was a violation in that case of the foot pursuit policy. Fair enough. Right. He should be scolded, et cetera. But the legal question of, are you going to put a cop in prison over this, has to be about the decision made at the moment of the shooting. And I just think that too many people in this country don't quite get that. But anyway, Terry Austin, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.